Mensaging ditanggihan and certified bitinaw. Good day, buddies! News with no bias. News with no exceptions. Delivering nothing but the truth. Live from Bad's Patron. News for the headlines. Early methodology in lie detection. Contributors in the history of lie detection. The case of Fry versus United States in using polygraph. Polygraph is an instrument for recording of changes in blood pressure, pulse rate, respiration, and skin resistance as indication of emotional disturbances, especially lying when questioned. As time goes by, the methods in detecting deception has developed into an instrument that uses different components which records the physiological response of the subject. And for the whole details, here is Bud Arnold Gonzalez. Bud?
Thank you, buddies. Early methodology of detecting deception. Trial by combat refers to a trial that is decided by personal battle between the common people in Europe and England during the Middle Ages. It is a trial in which the person accused fought with the accuser. It is the idea being that God would give victory to the person in the right. This is the method that was introduced into England by the Normans after 1066. Trial by ordeal is a formally used criminal trial in which the guilt or innocence of the accused was determined by a subjection to dangerous or painful tests, such as the submersion of the accused in hot water believed to be under divine control. Trial by hot iron ordeal involved a defendant carrying a red-hot iron bar to prove their innocence, tended to be used by the powers that when there were no witnesses to a crime or when the word of the accused was not deemed wholly credible. Ordeal by balance, a method mostly given to women, minors, and old or disabled people. The person performing the ordeal was twice weighed on a balance. If the person weighed lighter than the previous weight, they were considered innocent. If they were heavier the second time, they were considered guilty. The ordeal of rice chewing. The suspect was made to chew one handful of dry rice while being questioned and told to spit out after a certain amount of time. The rice was examined. If the rice came out easy enough and was moist, the suspect was judged innocent. If gods made the rice dry and it stuck to the person's mouth when they tried to spit it out, they were accused of lying and judged guilty. Donkey's tail ordeal was used in India around 500 BC. A person suspected of theft is subjected to a test to determine his or her guilt. The suspect is required to enter a dark tent, and inside the tent is a donkey. The tail of this donkey is covered with soot. The suspect is told to pull the tail of the donkey. When the suspect comes out with a dirty hand, he is not guilty as he is not afraid to pull the donkey's tail because he did not commit any wrong. A person who comes out of the tent with a clean hand is a presumed guilt as he afraid to pull the donkey's tail, a manifestation of guilt at the time.
The next headline, for the whole details, let us all hear our buddies.
Thank you, buddies. Contributors in the history of lie detection. Leonardo Killer patents what is now understood as the prototype of the modern polygraph. The Killer polygraph, today, Leonardo Killer is known as the father of polygraph. John A. Larson developed Larson Polygraph, an instrument capable of continuously recording blood pressure, pulse, and respiration. Under the Larson Polygraph, a strip of paper in which the tracing are recorded is mounted on two drums, which are turned by a spring mechanism known as kinograph. William Moulton Marston. Dr. William Moulton Marston is credited the invention of a primitive form of lie detector when he developed in 1915 of the systolic blood pressure test, when he would become subsequently a component of the modern polygraph. Your body's generous motto, 340.
Another contributor, Sir James Mackenzie, refined his clinical polygraph in his article entitled The Ink Polygraph. This instrument used clockwork mechanism for the paper rolling and time marker movements, and it produced ink recordings of physiological functions that were easier to acquire and to interpret. Vittorio Benosi, in 1941, successfully detected deception with a pneumograph, an instrument that perfectly measures an examinee's inhalation and exhalation, and demonstrated that changes in breathing patterns accompany deception. Cesar Lombroso, in 1895, employed the first scientific instrument to detect deception. He modified an existing instrument called hydrospigmometer and used this modified device in his experiment to measure the physiological changes that occurred in a prime suspect's blood pressure and pulse rating during a police interrogation. Your body, Rod Marcaliusan, reports.
The next contributor, George Sticker, was the first person to suggest the use of galvanograph for detecting deception. He theorized galvanic skin phenomenon was influenced by the exciting mental impressions. Otto Vigorov, 1907, was the first to use the term psychogalvanic reflex, an idea that the electrical phenomenon was due to the activity of the sweat glands. Charles Thomson Peer, in 1888, discovered that electrodermal response is caused by an increase in the action of the heart and vital energy converted with human emotions. Your body, Ayasamich Kamilgan, reported.
Another, Angelo Mosso, in 1878, used an instrument called plethysmograph in his research on emotion and fear on subjects undergoing questioning, and he studied the effects of these variables on their cardiovascular and respiratory activity. Jacques d'Arsenal, a French scientist who declared that electricity is generated by the body. This was known as external friction. He asserted that those sweat glands in the body at times store the electricity and at the other times discharge them. His works helped in the development of the galvanometer. Harold Bird, in 1918, he determined that respiratory changes were indicative of deception. He found out that changes in systolic blood pressure were greater value in determining deception than changes in respiration. Your body, Aldrian Katuran, reporting.
In the case of Fry versus United States in using polygraph, Mr. Fry, appellant, was convicted of the second-degree murder after the lower court disallowed appellant from introducing testimonial evidence relating to the results of a deception test. Appellant had taken following the crime. Appellant appeals his conviction.
Appellant was charged with and put on trial for murder. As his trial, appellant attempted to call an expert witness to testify that appellant had taken a systolic blood pressure deception test. And to further testify as to the results of the test, the expert testimony was held inadmissible by the lower court. Appellant was convicted of second-degree murder.
Rule of law. When a test such as systolic blood pressure deception test has not gained scientific recognition from psychological and physiological authorities, expert testimony regarding the results of such tests is inadmissible.
The test results appellant attempted to introduce into evidence did not meet the requirement that such evidence be sufficiently established to have gained general acceptance in the particular field in which it belongs, and therefore the test results were properly excluded by the lower court.
In other words, the court held that without an established place in science, the test was still in the blurred realm between experimental science and demonstrated science, and therefore inadmissible in here.
In the court's words, as the deception test was not sufficiently established, the testimony related to it is inadmissible. In the lower court was correct to have excluded it.